You all right, Steve?
Yeah.
Good.
Hi, everyone. We're going to wait for a few more arrivals and see how many we get. What we can do, if you fancied it, is to switch our cameras on while everyone's sort of accumulating, and then we can dive into the detail of carbon certification. So you're welcome to put your cameras on and your mics on if you wanted that before we kick off, just to say hi. But in a moment, I'll share my screen once we've sort of all arrived. Is everybody? And also, could you maybe just confirm you can hear me okay? James, hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Hear you and see you fine.
That's really great. We've got Andy there. Hi, Andy. Thank you. To see you. What we'll do is just wait a couple more secs, and then we'll kick off. What we could do while we're just sort of accumulating. Hello, Megan. People say hi to each other, everything like that. I think that'd be really great. I know we're only got about half an hour tops. Phil, hi. So what I was going to do is, run through some slides about carbon certification, but also wanted to sort of frame it a little bit around zero carbon, if that's okay. And if you've got any questions, maybe we could field those along the way. So we might sort of turn the cameras off, or keep your cameras on, but go on to mute while we're just sort of presenting. But then it'd be great to leave enough time at the end to ask some questions, so we can get into some practical stuff. So if you have a think about what you might want to ask along the way, that'd be fab. And if you could put them into chat, Joe, my colleague here from Planet Mark, and myself will look at those, and we'll figure out your questions and either pick them up and answer them along the way, or we'll answer questions at the end, whatever feels best, if that's all right. What might be great is in the chat, maybe we could, whilst we're sort of thinking about questions, we could also be lovely to know how many of us are already sort of measuring carbon, and that might give us an idea of what we're sort of focusing on here in terms of the certification and so on. So if I don't really know how to run a poll, I'm terrible at that, but maybe you could just put into the chat if you or your company are either measuring carbon or you're providing services to do that. That might be really good. And like I said, for new arrivals, what we will do is we'll kick off in a moment. But if there's questions you'd like to ask or set even now or along the way, we'll try and answer those as we go along. Or if there's a few, then we'll bundle them up and then do it all at the end, if that's okay. All right. So in the chat, if you could, as we start, just put yes, I'm measuring carbon, or no, I'm not. That'd be really good, and we get a sense of where everyone's at. Any questions, pop them in there. Great. So straight away, Georgie, yeah, where do we start? I'm going to cover that off as best as I can. And Kate, not yet, we're working towards it, which is what we want to hear. Fabulous. All right, here we go. Can we let's press on. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through some stuff around sort of carbon certification. I'm going to do it at quite a pace, if that's okay. And then that gives us time to talk at the end. I know everyone's sort of overrunning. We're going to try not to overrun. Hopefully, can everyone see my screen like that? If that's all good for everyone. Okay, so we're going to talk about carbon certification. I'm Steve Malkin from the Planet Mark. I did sort of mention to the early arrivals, we're going to frame this a little bit around zero carbon, net zero carbon as well, because everything is sort of accelerating so quickly around the net zero topic. So it will be about how to start and how to get going and how to do better with carbon measurement, how to reduce, but also to to think about zero carbon, because it's certainly coming our way, particularly if you're in a supply chain. Yeah, so let's get underway. Firstly, I just wanted to put out, I'm just going to try and also find how to get the questions up. I can't quite see those, so I'll figure that out as we go along. It's good to be back, if not physically, then sort of emotionally and spiritually, mentally, in Cornwall, because we set the Planet Mark up in 2013 with the Eden Project, in partnership with the Eden Project, because we recognized that we wanted to measure stuff really, really well. We wanted to measure carbon, energy, water waste, social value, and but we wanted to do it in a way that really engages people in the process and could communicate great progress. So we recognized that Eden was a great partner to help us actually do that. So it's good to be back in Cornwall. I hope you've had a good day with the Sustainable Growth Summit. So, and I'm sure here everyone is like-minded in terms of what we're looking to do, which is about empowering change, but very much with a vision of about a brighter, better future, which is something which is very powerful in our relationship with Eden and everything that we do at the Planet Mark. And I wanted to just come away with some outcomes for you here that might be helpful, and looking at where certification can help. There's a lot you can do and should be doing anyway on your own. You don't necessarily need certification, but there's places where it might help. It can help in reducing carbon and setting targets to do it, and setting credible targets, and including net zero. It can also help in engaging stakeholders in the process, which could be you, your teams, even if you're not specialists in sustainability in your own companies, but about engaging people in the process and upskilling them, educating them, and getting to run your own program so it becomes cultural. And a big piece around how important certification can be in communication. So if we can communicate more transparently, if we can eliminate greenwash and be very open, honest and transparent about our progress, what's working, what's not working, certification absolutely does help with that. So there could be some outcomes we're looking at from today's talk. And just a sort of bit of context, clearly the acceleration in understanding around what is happening around us in terms of the climate crisis and the role we can play is motivating very, very big change, and it's happening extremely quickly. And part of this is certainly around net zero. And there's a little bit of confusion around sort of terminology around net zero. We are recording this session. I think we'll be able to be able to share these slides as well. So hopefully this might be helpful, but this definition around net zero and where it really is very different from, say, carbon neutral is going to be important for you to understand. So firstly, about measuring and reducing all of your direct and the material indirect greenhouse gas emissions across your entire business. So the material indirect ones is really interesting. It's something we call scope 3. We'll come on to a little bit later, but that's where you'll be asking others who you may be interacting with in your value chain what their carbon emissions are. So if somebody in your value chain has set a net zero target, and they may be coming to you to say, well, what are your carbon, what is your carbon footprint? How are you reducing it? And actually, indeed, are you setting net zero targets? So number one is very important. Secondly, you need to reduce these emissions by as much as you can, as fast as you can, obviously, but certainly with a pathway needed to help keep global temperature within the 1.5 degree limit, which means roughly, at the very least, we need to be reducing emissions by 50% by 2030. And the residual emissions need to be balanced, if you like, offset, but balanced meaning sort of using projects which sequester carbon, they don't just mitigate it, permanently removed from the atmosphere. And all of this needs to be done by 2050. So this is your net zero sort of, it's a rather long elevator pitch, but it starts to sort of nut down exactly what that definition is. We're touring the UK, just to give you a little bit of news. Tomorrow we announce our zero carbon tour, which actually is going to start in Cornwall. So we're touring the UK with this net zero carbon message to enable organisations across the UK, towns, cities and communities, schools, hospitals to set credible net zero carbon targets and take their stories from around the UK all the way up to COP26. And we're doing this in a zero carbon, fully electric carbon battle bus, which launches tomorrow in London and then comes straight down to Eden on June 14, where we're running net zero sessions free of charge for anyone who wants to turn up. There is a registration thing here. It is completely free. It's physically at Eden. So if you're able to attend, in the morning, there's sessions around what is net zero, and specifically a workshop to help you set a credible net zero carbon target. Information around this Race to Zero, which is the UN-backed program and campaign, and then a sustainability open mic session with local project Cool Earth, and who are Cornwall based, with Matthew Owen, the COO there, and Richard Lilly from Project Seagrass, amazing project to sequester carbon using seagrass and then networking afterwards. So it's completely free. You can register online, or we can send you details if you pop your email there. So we'll be in Cornwall on the 14th. We're working with companies around the UK, just the Planet Mark, helping them cut carbon on an annual basis. And one of the reasons why so many joint programs and certifications like ours, they can be all sorts of different certifications, is it actually makes really, really good business sense. And it's been extremely important to sort of liken your carbon measurement and reduction and the work you're doing in carbon in terms of, is this good for my business? And there's a really bulletproof sort of business case for sustainability and in particular carbon measurement and reduction in terms of attraction of great talent, you're growing your profits, reducing your costs by cutting energy, future-proofing the business so you're more climate resilient. And there is a gaining of competitive advantage here as well, where many pre-qualification questionnaires, tenders and the like require you to now report your carbon. So it's a really good business case. And the work that you can get through, organizations and certifications mean that our community is actually cutting their carbon in the last full reporting year pre-COVID by 12% in absolute terms, which is really, really big. It's ahead of the sort of science-based targets around about sort of 10, 11% that you might be looking for on an annual basis. So this is really significant and can be very successful for cutting carbon. So what's it all about? I want to put this framework and particularly come back to that question about how do I get going, or how do I do a little bit more? We see 3 really valuable steps in this whole sort of certification process about measurement, engagement and communication. And I want to just leave you with a couple of takeaways here through this. So let's look at measurement first. Sort of mantra, you can't manage what you don't measure. So really measuring something is critically important. So to do this as a company, you're looking at gathering data that's readily available. So if you're looking at what you could do to start measuring your own carbon footprint, you start to look at your utilities, your energy, your water, the consumption of stuff like waste has a carbon footprint to it. And this data actually is available inside your own organization. Typically, you might want to align your data gathering with a particular reporting period, which could be year end, financial year end, or calendar year. But have a consistent reporting period. Certification sometimes helps you with that, and it sometimes also helps you set your reporting boundary, what's in and what's out, and how do you report that? And it breaks down your carbon footprint. Say if you're sitting on something like the greenhouse gas protocol as a standard for measuring carbon, you'll be looking at what's in your reporting boundary and what's out of it in your 3 scopes, scopes 1, 2, and 3, your direct fuel use in your offices and your buildings or your vehicle fleet, scope 2 being your electricity, and scope 3 being your indirect emissions that you might have some responsibility for, certainly influence over. And the certification can help validate that, ensure that you're reporting appropriately, and also make recommendations about where you can improve. Yeah, so the idea is if you measure something on an annual basis, set a reduction target. Yeah, and that could be a nominal target of 5 or 10% reduction, be it in absolute terms or an intensity measure, or it could be a zero carbon target. And then each year, or in more frequent reporting, each year though, you could be then certifying against your progress against your said targets, which is what you need to do for zero carbon. And if you're looking at a pie chart, say for a company that's got 900 tons of carbon, you'll be looking at their sort of energy use. You'll be looking at the waste, you'll be looking at their travel emissions, their water procurement. And if you're playing this back inside a company, the value to this is basically it's management information. Now, if this is on the sort of the board agenda about how's our carbon footprint, and is it improving, you can then be reporting back using management information, using carbon as a great metric to improve your performance about, reducing emissions, reducing energy, reducing costs, but being more sustainable. And it drags in other types of data around. If you're looking at your waste and your recycling rates, you could then start to look at actually, what is our policy around plastic, as a for instance. Interesting, you could also sort of mirror carbon with sort of social value, and you could get similar sort of great reporting and data back inside the company. The value of that then is actually how you then might start to engage your people. And this is something we really, really focus on, and we think is incredibly important. So what do you do with that information? So inside organizations, for us, the certification isn't something you just stick on a wall and you come back to every year. Actually, it's something which is cultural. So the opportunity here is always to unlock the passion inside your own company, however big and however small. People care and they want to participate. And through a program that you're administering around sort of carbon measurement, carbon isn't always the most exciting thing, but people are passionate about it and they want to feel empowered and they're taking action. And certainly, we talk about going from carbon to culture, and we've seen it happen so very, very quickly with organizations who get to grips with their own carbon footprint and then take their sustainability in great leaps and bounds and accelerate into the most exciting places. And to do that, sometimes we team up with great charities, two Cornwall-based or charities at Eden Project and Cool Earth. And we weave those into our narrative and weave them into our story. And with every organization, we introduce them, every organization we certify, we introduce Eden. 5% of our funds go to Eden, and also we protect an acre of rainforest with Cool Earth in the Peruvian Amazon, which is under sort of great threat for deforestation. So that those companies and those charities then can work more together. And that's a great way to engage people in the process. And then this sort of final step about the benefits of certification, if you like, but certainly of carbon measurement, is that you're getting data together that gives you a consistent knowledge around where you are and the ability to talk from a point of transparency, openness, and honesty about your position and where you're tackling the climate crisis. So for us, everything that we do in terms of a data grab from an organization has to be mirrored with evidence. So we need to know where the numbers are coming from. And that's effectively what we certify to. So we take a carbon footprint, or we create a carbon footprint, and then we certify on the basis that we know the data and we know the evidence which supports it, which is critically important. So that third-party assurance can help both confirm your results, but also it certainly catches errors. But a really important thing is that with that knowledge and that safety net of coming from a point of absolute truth around where you are, gives you the license to communicate really, really effectively and widely. And we know that's extremely powerful because that's what's changing other organizations and the way they're working. So your opportunity here might be to say, okay, well, look, this is what we're doing and how we're going about it. The data underpins the various ways you can tell a story about the actions that you and your people and your suppliers and your customers are taking together. So the communications become really, really immensely powerful and of great value, and give great reassurance and trust to people that you're dealing with and working with. And this is your story that you should be extending and can be extending far and wide. And David Attenborough did say, actually, the most critical thing we can probably do right now is communicate, to everyone on the planet, what role they can play in the climate crisis and how they can help. It also helps in terms of reporting up into various frameworks. Here's the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. We report into at least 9 of those with a carbon report that you can do. You'll align with 9 Sustainable Development Goals, which is really, really important. And that can help you align. If you're a smaller business, it would help you align with the corporate goals and objectives of some of your customer base. So you think, okay, let's take carbon. It's a great management tool for our business. In actual fact, we can report into much wider frameworks and get that sort of collaborative and community feel of us all working and acting together. And why is this important, particularly around net zero? There's massive pressures now around net zero in terms of the environmental and social imperative. We know that there's escalating and radically accelerating public concern and demand for action around the climate, which organizations are being demanded to move on. And so there's a commercial imperative as well, which is around that, we know there's cost savings resulting of reducing energy, water, waste, carbon, but it's also sort of an imperative quite often about how you are reacting to customer demands, be they purchasers and consumers, or be they large corporate customers or people in your supply chain, saying, actually, what are you doing? How are you performing? Because if we're going to go to net zero, the only way we can go to net zero is by doing it together. And that then is bringing all sorts of regulatory requirements coming through. We're working with BEIS right now on our carbon tour, the UK carbon tour, knowing that we need to spread this message around measuring and reducing carbon so it doesn't catch companies out. And that's why we're going around the UK doing it. So there's many, many imperatives around why net zero is really accelerating incredibly quickly, and why we are a partner to the UN-backed Race to Zero campaign, which is gathering organizations. Government's got a great target to get as many organizations signed up to net zero, making their pledges to their net zero commitments and their targets. But they've got to be credible and they've got to be backed by a plan. And that's what our tour is helping take out onto the road. But it's certainly something that we advise you get on your radar, because if something around you is setting a net zero target, they will be wanting you to measure and reduce at the same time. So for us, look, anything around carbon measurement, it can be certification, but around carbon measurement reduction means about setting credible targets and helping you plan and stay to those. If you're going to make those net zero, it's totally possible now. and we can help with some advice on that free of charge as part of our tour, which is online or coming to Cornwall office on June 14th. But there is a wonderful opportunity here to increase knowledge around it, engage your own stakeholders and people inside your own companies so they get involved, roll their sleeves up, and it's totally empowering and exciting. And to communicate your progress with confidence. So it's open, it's transparent, it's honest about what's working and what isn't. Couple of calls to action, maybe. We'd love you to be setting that zero carbon targets, but if you just need to start and get moving, then we've got some toolkits we can send you just free of charge, just to help you get going about how to collect data, how do you collate that data, and how do you work out your own carbon footprint, and how do you engage people in the process. Look out for the Race to Zero, the hashtag, and look out for the Zero Carbon Tour. If you can join us at Eden, maybe we can take this conversation a little bit further with much more time. I wanted to leave you before we take some questions about the great man. What did he say? We're great problem solvers, but what we need to do is imagine a better future and work to create it. And we think that that goal is everything for us right now. It's why we're here today on a Tuesday afternoon, talking while the sun is out, talking about carbon measurement, because we care. It's all in our hands. We've got 9 years, 8.5 to go in this decade of action, the most critical decade for us, probably. But we feel there's a movement for change. We can do it together. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I hope you don't mind the speed that we went through. And maybe we can answer some questions now. I'm really bad at this sort of stuff, so could you just bear with me one moment while I get the right buttons? And if you can see me, it'd be really lovely to switch your cameras and mics on, or at least your cameras, and then maybe we can dive into some questions.
I've got a few questions here. If others don't want to come in, I've kind of answered a few in the chat, but maybe we'll just go over them just to check we've kind of got all the information. So firstly from James, thank you for your questions about the interest in understanding the measures, how we measure our quality assured to be robust, consistent across all companies and sectors. We've kind of touched on a little bit, but Steve, if you want to dive
Could you repeat, was that from James?
Yes.
Is James here? James, hi. Could you tell me that one again? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for answering that. I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So my question was around the quality assurance, really, and how do we make sure that this is a consistent measure against other companies? So we constantly get the question, well, I might take this measure from this company, but another company might take another one from somebody else, and it looks like they're better than we are in a competitive market. How do you make sure consistent measuring across the piece, I guess? Yeah,
brilliant question. And look, there are some caveats around sort of carbon measurement, because when you get into it, you have to make some assumptions. It's what you do. But here's some ways of layering on that assurance and that consistency. Number one, sit on a robust methodology. So we sit on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. Most organizations do. What you want to do, though, is ensure that is the sort of the source of the methodology which is being used. Openly reporting your measurement boundary is extremely vital to understand actually how much of an organization is being measured here. Now, typically scope 1 and 2 stuff is pretty straightforward. Those are the direct and direct sort of fuel and electricity. The issue comes in and around sort of scope 3 and how much of that scope 3 is being measured. Now, net zero requires you to get into scope 3, and really that's what's going to, I think, be a bit of a game changer in terms of how companies are reporting on a like-for-like basis, because they have to determine if scope 3 is material and get into that with a high degree of engagement and accuracy. Caveats here are that within any sort of carbon measurement, all carbon emissions factors are updated annually, and we always do that, and same with everyone else like us. But within there, sometimes you have to make assumptions. Yeah, and it's being very open about those and putting them into an assumptions table at the back end of a report. But I think more consistency is happening right now as we're being more open and better at measuring carbon. Always, though, look for the evidence to support your numbers and make sure that's in place. I hope that helps.
That's great. And it's quite similar to Megan's question, just following on about what makes us different, what sets us apart from the other certifications that are on the market.
Got it. Oh, crikey. I was trying not to use it as a selling thing, Megan, but I can see you there. Hello. So look, anyone in our space is doing the right thing. Yeah. So it's, what you need to do is look into the market and find one which feels right for you and your company. I think that, many of us measure in the same way. Yeah. We might be doing exactly the same way as the Carbon Trust and so on. For us, we will always measure emissions annually. We think we should be moving quickly. So it's at least annually we certify. So that's an important thing. But for us, I suppose what makes us a little bit different is that we do work really hard at engaging people in the process. So we don't want to be parachuted in as the expert consultants. We want to make sure that every organisation is running their own sustainability programme. And that way, then the culture, the understanding, the knowledge, the passion around this, that's where success is for us.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And Andrew's got a quick question about where do we consistently see the biggest opportunity to make the greatest and quickest, most cost-effective reduction in an organization's footprint?
Oh, man.
What's the silver bullet?
Oh, yeah.
I thought I'd make it hard for you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. It's lovely to see you here. Thank you. And another expert in the room. It's always good. That's another point, actually. Expertise is always in the room. So probably there is no silver bullet, as we probably know. I suppose for us, very, very quick and substantial wins come from rapidly engaging people inside a company and creating a forum for them to feed back into the board or a decision-making place where they have the power to say, right, we want to do these particular things. Will you sign these off because it's going to help us meet our targets and move significantly faster forward? So that with good data, you can make very, very well-informed decisions if it's tooling up your own team. Yeah. So for us, it's the people bit. And then, tackling anything around your own offices, and your travel, there's always going to be some quick wins in there. More difficult to achieve stuff as Andy, is like, all right, what do we do in sort of like purchasing of fleet vehicles and something, and switching out at the right time from petrol diesel to EV, and that sort of switchover point, and making sure there's a good sort of return on investment for that needs to be played out. I know we're going to get shut out in a minute. Look,
we've got 1 minute left, but I know Nick has a question. If we can try and, if there's a quick way of.
Okay, hi. So I saw Fora have gone through certification with you. I suppose my question is, what could help more serviced office companies and owners of real estate to kind of persuade them to go through your sort of certification?
Love that.
What needs to happen?
So I tell you what service officers need to do is gift every single person that is on their estate with the carbon footprint per desk or per GIA in their space, because they are stopping, those service officers are stopping those companies, those individuals reporting their carbon, because they bundle up the utilities costs in the service fee. It's within their gift to give every single person in their estate their own carbon footprint. Now, if they can understand that radical thing they can do, let's communicate that together.